we're going to introduce our speaker, Poppy Welch, who's going to get us going. Now, Poppy is the head of Go Ultra Low. It's a joint government and industry campaign with the aim to provide information on switching to an electric vehicle. If you have questions for Poppy, please submit them into the Q&A tab. And Poppy, great to see you, and thank you for joining us today. Now, Poppy, we've got a brought forward date, government date, for ending the sale of new petrol and diesel cars and vans to 2030. It's a clear signal to all of us to make the shift, but of course it may also seem a little overwhelming, whether that's the reality or it's perceived, and at a time when businesses already have a lot to cope with. So I wonder if you can help our audience get under the skin of this goal and where we begin. So for example, could you tell us a bit more about the start of the journey to fleet electrification? Why make that switch?
Sure. So firstly, thanks for having me on, and hello everybody. So Go Ultra Low, I might just give you 2 seconds of background on what we're here to do. So we're a campaign that was set up a number of years ago to sort of encourage the uptake of electric vehicles, both amongst consumers and businesses. And as you say, although we are a long way from where we were about 6 or 7 years ago when our campaign was set up, as you say, it's still a sort of overwhelming minefield in many ways, whether you're an individual consumer or a small business or a large business looking to do this. So what we aim to do is, I guess our strategy in many ways is twofold. We want to get people and businesses interested for a start in making this switch. So, there can be essentially, if we're talking about businesses, I suppose there are two main reasons why you might want to switch from petrol and diesel to electric. Those probably sit in the CSR category and in the cost category. And I think probably many businesses now have sort of appreciate that CSR element is really important, particularly for those businesses perhaps with younger customers. It's even more important because I think younger generations are less willing to sort of use businesses that aren't seen to be at least trying to be environmentally friendly in some way. So that, when it comes to their vehicles, that's important. I'm sure some of the other panelists can talk more about that as well. And then obviously costs. Now, lots of people are concerned about the cost of electric vehicles, but over the years, I think we and other organisations have managed to sort of convince people that actually, if you look at whole life costs, running costs, there are clear savings to be made, and particularly for businesses who are looking at costs very, very closely. There are lots of things, and I can talk about some of the areas in which there are sort of cost savings to be made. So I suppose one of the first things that we might talk about is the plug-in car grant or the plug-in van grant. So that's whereby the government offers up to £3,000 off the cost of an eligible car, or up to £8,000 off the cost of an eligible van. So there's a really good start there. So if you are looking at upfront costs, there will be discounts on those if you're looking at zero emission vehicles. And then all sorts of other things. So for example, if you're looking at company cars, last year the government introduced a 0% benefit in kind tax rate on zero emission vehicles, and that only goes up to 1% in the next financial year and 2% the year after. So a really good advantage over petrol and diesel vehicles, where the rate, and someone might correct me here, but it's around 16% or something like that. So a really big discount. And then when you're getting a bit more into the nitty gritty, you can get grants from the government to put chargers in at your workplace, for example. It's up to £350 per socket, just up to 40, so quite a generous scheme there. And then when you're looking at sort of costs related to the individual vehicles, there is, if your business works in and around London, you won't be paying the congestion or ULEZ charges. And there are other things as well, but as you can see, there's a kind of case built up there on the cost front. Of course, it's not just costs. There are all sorts of other things to consider, and campaigns like ours sort of hope to help businesses understand some of those, you know, so whether it's, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, what are the kind of hurdles that you're helping businesses overcome?
So, you know, we try to help out with information on charging infrastructure, the range of vehicles available. People often cite lack of choice as a potential barrier as well, but actually now there are kind of well over 100 different electric vehicles available, and that's across fully electric and plug-in hybrids. So, you know, that concern is certainly lessening as we go on, and there are so many more vehicles coming to launch over the next, you know, few years. Every automotive manufacturer has got really robust electrification plans coming up, so that choice will only increase. So that's good for businesses. And I was talking about charging as well. So obviously people are concerned about infrastructure, but again, that is improving all the time. So whether you're looking at workplace charging and the grants I talked about, or access to public charging, I mean, I think we're already up to around 38,000 publicly accessible charge points, which, you know, could be used by businesses where possible. So it's those kind of things that we try to help give hopefully useful information to businesses looking into this. I guess we see ourselves as quite early on in the sort of purchase and investigation journey, as it were, because essentially our initial job is just to get those businesses thinking about this in the first place.
And that's an interesting point, isn't it? I certainly remember from the experience that we had when I was dealing with this on the ground, was that with quite a varied fleet, you know, and I think, you know, we were quite well up on looking at the whole life cycle costs and factoring all that things in. So it got to the point where for the cars and small vans, actually we were quite comfortable as to what would work and what wouldn't work. But later on down the line, as we were progressing on that journey, actually that was the point at which we I think maybe had the capability from the first steps to take on something a little bit more complicated, like what happens if you need to fit that van out for a particular trade purpose, or you know, what if the person using that van has to go home in the evening, or they're on call outs or something like that. So it is definitely a journey that businesses are on, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And like I say, you know, there's a stage where you just start thinking about it. And actually one thing to add is, you know, we talk to businesses who actually see this as somewhat of a marketing tool as well, particularly, you know, as we move towards 2030 and 2050 net zero targets. You know, all businesses sort of have to be looking at this kind of thing. And if you're seen to be the first, there is certainly, I think, a customer set who are really interested in this. So actually, it can be quite beneficial from a sort of customer acquisition point of view as well.
That's really, really good to hear, and good to hear you're seeing that with actually engaging directly with businesses. So shall we move on? We've got some questions that have come in for you, Poppy. So the first question I'd like to put to you is from Alejandro Alvarado. How should electric vehicle fleets think about support services like roadside assistance? So is there anything different about that? You know, who's providing those services? Is that something you're able to touch on?
I'll be quite open. It's not a huge area of expertise, but I do know that both insurance companies and roadside assistance companies such as the AA and RAC are developing bespoke, or have developed bespoke services for electric vehicles, electric fleets. So I know that there are specific options out there for both businesses and individuals running electric vehicles. Yeah.
But that is good to hear, and I'm sure that anyone getting in touch would be able to find their way through to the answers to those. Perhaps some of our other panelists can chip in on that as well. A question from Angus Gribben. There appear to be restrictions in having larger electric vehicle options. What are these restrictions? And I don't know if, Angus, if you had something particular in mind there. Poppy, does anything spring to mind with that? I mean, certainly I could speak to the experience I've had with larger vehicles.
Well, I guess only that, you know, in terms of development of vehicles, I guess we're quite far along in the development of cars, and there are quite a lot of passenger car options out there. Then, as you mentioned, smaller vans are a bit behind that, but there are an increasing number of options. And then, you know, larger vehicles, whether it's HGVs, buses, lorries, etc., are a bit behind that as well, because, you know, they often have very specific needs. So I think sort of broad answer is that these things are all coming. It's just that they're at a slightly later stage.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, Angus, not knowing what your particular situation is there, but certainly my experience was that it's exactly what you said, Poppy, that there's a lot of choice at the smaller end. You know, because it's taking longer for the larger vehicles to come online at the moment, there's perhaps less choice. If your use case fits neatly into what's available, it will be fine. But, you know, if certainly because I was dealing with quite a varied fleet, what we'd find is we had to kind of pick and choose where those vehicles were going to be appropriate. And you know, every year as something new would come onto the market, we were like, oh, excellent, that's going to fill a gap, that's going to fill a gap. So you could see that the offering was broadening. And again, it was also, you know, one of these things when you get into medium and large size vans, for example, so not that large a vehicle in the scheme of things, we were finding that actually it came down to what the particular use of the van was, because if it needed to be kitted out with a ladder on the roof and particular kinds of equipment, then, you know, that was going to make a difference to the weighting or what was possible with the exact spec of the van. Whereas obviously, you know, if you've got 5 different or 10 different options on the market, you're going to find one probably that works for you. Whereas, you know, when it's early days, that was harder. So yeah, it's definitely our experience. So let's see, what else have we got here? So here's a question from Nitesh Tadani. Are there any compliance or regulations around overcharging and anything around mandating smart charging? I don't know if that's your realm of things, Poppy. Do you have any insights on that?
I don't totally understand the first part of the question. I know, I mean, when it comes to smart charging, the government's obviously launching consultations into ensuring that all charging is smart and also easily usable, so with a simple RFID card. So, you know, that again, there are improvements coming when it comes to the charging network. I don't know if that was quite what.
No, I'm not sure either. Nitesh, if we haven't answered your question, maybe pop in a follow-up question for one of our next Q&A slots, and we'll see if we can find the right answer for you. Well, thank you very much indeed, Poppy. We've had loads more questions come in, which is super exciting. Unfortunately, we are going to have to move on, but thank you so much for your insights on that, and we will welcome you back for some chat with the other panelists towards the end of the session. So thank you very much, Poppy.
Thanks a lot.